you have anything to participate in Jason's presentation?
What I'm going to do is provide what I had Sherry set out, except it's a complete version. It helps. I already gave one to you, Mike. You owe me another.
Oh, thank you.
So now, this is the same thing I sent earlier. It just has the breakdown of the model, so I have one.
Give them before
They gave me an email, but then I went and asked them.
Yeah.
Heard it that way.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, he's always calling.
No, those are restaurants. I asked them what detail.
Jason, you don't need the projector here, right?
No, this is just a discussion.
And Madam Administrator, do you want to be a new strategy? Here to speak?
Fine. Thank you very much.
First off, I'd like to thank the school committee, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here. Second off, I'd like to apologize as to how this came out. My intent to present this at the town council meeting was to diffuse the negativity. It was not to be a champion, be a hero, be in anything. Really, the gist of this plan, I'm just going to read the focus that I wrote today. It's a very, very simplistic approach to how the town and school can work together, should work together to fund our needs. One of the biggest problems it seems we have is just communication, which is why I was really happy that I got the opportunity to be in front of you to explain this plan tonight. So first off, I'm just going to read my plan focus. The first time I presented this to the superintendent and the administration 2 Wednesdays ago, February 17th, I was nervous. Now, I was in his room. He actually pointed it out. He said, you seem nervous. And I said, you know, I do, because I want the plan to work. So anyways, as I explained the plan, I came to realize that I really have no reason to worry. I created this plan on my own time, with no collaboration, on a Saturday at home, with a 5-year capital plan provided by the superintendent. My kids were at a birthday party with my wife, so I had a simple idea that I may be able to get the town and school to work together on the same page as far as funding the real projects of the school. The real projects include both a potential bond issuance and all health and safety needs that have not been addressed. So this plan, just if I can sidetrack, is a combination of both building and health and safety needs, because if you have one and you don't have the other, you haven't completed what the school needs. You have to complete both in a plan. So now, if neither the town nor school want to move forward, it can be scrapped. Basically, I spent 4 hours of my own time to try to come up with something everybody could agree to in principle to work together. So if people don't want to have it, you know, we don't like it, we want to throw it out, it's okay. It didn't kill me to spend 4 hours of my own time. I actually think trying to get us to work together is the right answer, whether I'm, you know, kicked to the curb or not. So anyways, so the 5 focus points. All school capital needs to be funded. Ultimately, the taxpayers fund that. That would be everybody here that's in this community, the school committee. That would be residents that are in the audience today. Ultimately, the taxpayer is going to fund this, whether it funds it to the school or whether it funds it directly to a capital plan that does the repairs. Potential bond issuance would need to be funded if building needs to happen. So the real problem, I believe, that happened here, and why the town didn't necessarily sign on for phase 2, was that it just wasn't communicated why RIDE's phase 2 is so much higher. But it's easy to see if you look at the superintendent's plan. Health and safety was not addressed in the $4.3 million bond issue. Only building was addressed, which is building 6 classrooms enough to do what this district needs in its school system? Absolutely not. Look at the 5-year capital plan that was prepared. All of these other items are needed to be done as well. Whether, I use the example, would you rather change your oil every month or monthly, or fix your engine every 2 years? It's much cheaper to change your oil and to fund this now than it is to put it off for years when the building collapses on a student's head. So the concept here is, regardless of what the need is, whether it's health and safety, whether it's a building, whether it's a plan to fund it, should be both the town and school. Because ultimately, it's the taxpayer, which is everybody in front of me that I'm presenting this to. Ultimately, you're going to pay the bill on this. The best way to pay it is with everybody at the table, rather than each person doing their own thing and hoping that the end result works for us. I think if we came together and agreed on a long-term plan, which would include town funding, school funding, ride funding, bond issuance, we could do everything that's needed. It just has to all be agreed to by everybody to work together. So now, second point I wanted to make in this, or third point I wanted to make is, I agree with the opinion that the school has. The fund balance is yours to spend on whatever you want to. So the concept of this plan was to take the original presentation of all the items that are in the 5-year plan and fund it. I mean, it's your money, your projects, you should be doing that. Pretty simple concept to me, I think. But what we really need to do is put our past differences aside to move forward. So the town should agree to fund additional money to make sure the schools don't collapse on kids' heads. I agree with that. Now, I still have to sell that to the town council. I have to sell it to the budget committee. I have to sell it to the other taxpayers that might not be pro-school. But I believe it has a chance if everybody's willing to put in their piece to come to the table. So the school should agree that use of some of its accumulated fund balance should be put back into the school facilities. The plan you've already created does that. So this actually just builds on that model, but really creates funding sources to the model. So now that I've done the basic gist of what the concept is, we'll flip to page 2, which I provided today, and we'll go through the one-page document I created. So now, I kind of did a wish list of models. What you have right now is the detail for models A, B, and C in your packet. Those details are all certain expenditure groups pulled out of the 5-year capital plan. So model A would just consider if reconfiguration is an option, we still need to do all the health and safety. So this plan would be for reconfiguration and health and safety. I created model B, health and safety, and if we needed to build a building. What would it cost us, and who would have to pay what if we were actually to have to build? Then I created model C, which would be reconfiguration, and every single other item that was needed by the school in the capital plan. So these models, moving targets, all based off of the 5-year capital plan from the superintendent, they may not be accurate. You may not want to fund a truck in year 1 for $65,000. You may want to do something else. Ventilation system. That I can't create the model for. All I could do is put the plan in an Excel file and sort it how I see fit. Now, how I see fit is meaningless because I am not an employee of the school department. I do not know these answers. But if you look at model A, B, and C, it's based off of the 5-year capital plan, which I read. So every item in this is nothing created by me. It's all been created by the administration of what they believe their needs are. So again, this plan is taking an existing condition and putting a funding model to it. So if we go to the lower section, which I have funding sources, my first box is what might the school have at the end of 2 years that they could contribute to this plan. So now I ran a model. I did an estimate of, again, the same plan that was presented to me, backing off a surplus of $450,000, estimating that the $700,000 surplus in FY16 will be re-earmarked against expenses in the future. So the argument of they have this extra money already, don't fund them anymore, is kind of moot. Because once you apply that to all the things you haven't funded, there's no extra money in the future. So I wanted to show a model of what do you have now, and where are you going to be in 2 years?
No, he doesn't.
Question?
We don't have 700 anymore, we spent 440 of it.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, I
But
brought that up.
was that a one-time earmark purchase, the 414 you guys did?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So it's not reappropriated in next year's budget yet?
No.
No.
So if somebody from the town said you have $700,000 that's not been re-earmarked, is that statement true or not?
No. Well, we
Go
re-add
ahead.
about 400 of the 700.
Yeah. Well, no, I know, but I'm saying if we were to take this year and just move it forward 1 year to next year.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have a surplus. Well,
I
that-
don't either, and that's why I wanted to
Well, you do have
show
a
it.
surplus, it's just that we've made a decision to spend it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't take away the fact that it was in fact a surplus. We just spent it.
He just has to spend more on a bond. That's what he ends up with.
Right. But
He ends
you
up with
said
more.
700, and I just wanted you to know we don't have 700.
I know, you have about 286, which is 700 minus the 414
Yeah, let's
rear.
call it 300.
I
If
just
you
wanted,
wanna-
I didn't know if you knew that.
If you want to flip to the last page, here's the detail.
Yeah, he put it in the last page, I asked.
Okay.
The last page of the
The last page is how I arrived at 1.3 million of school money.
Yes, we did. Yeah. I'm not saying, this is a moving topic.
Again, these are all things that move based on current year expenses, next year expenses. But an argument that's been given to me from town taxpayers is, if they had 700,000 extra, enough to squirrel away or spend 414 on one-time purchases, doesn't that mean their budgets can sustain 700 extra next year? And my answer to that is not necessarily. Because once you re-earmark it to those purposes you see fit that you need to do in your school system, the money's gone. So the concept of me showing a 2.5-year plan was twofold. What do you have now? What are you going to have in 2 years? So I wanted to show that once money's re-earmarked against school expenditures, you really don't have a surplus of 700,000 in 17 and 18. You really might have none. Maybe you have a deficit. Maybe the state aid is cut and I have to make up the difference from tax money. Whatever that plan in the future is going to be, it'll play out in the future. But what I wanted to show is, if I'm going to do a 2.5-year plan, I got to show funding sources over 2.5 years. So I showed that an estimated picture of the school on that last page. So if you can see, the top one is the 1.3 you have. I subtract off the 450 reserve that I agree with. I believe, I actually have had conversations that maybe that should be higher, but I don't want to, you know, whatever you agree to as a surplus is better than none. I did your FY16 where you had an estimated 700,000. You spent 414 of that, so you got an added 286 to it as an estimate. That leaves you with about the 1.3 million. So that's how I came up with the funding. If you look at 17 and 18, I put a little blurb in the middle to try to explain why I wanted to show 17 and 18. Because if you don't show 17 and 18, people are just assuming you have an extra 700,000 that you could spend on stuff. So why give you any more? Why increase MOE, which my plan actually does? My plan is actually to fund more money from the town to make sure these projects get done. So it's hard for me to answer an argument of, they have 700,000 extra, how are you going to give them more? Well, they don't really have 700,000 extra once it's been re-earmarked against all the costs you guys want to re-earmark it to. Right? Does that concept make sense as to why I'm trying to show those years after?
Yes.
Okay. Are we all set with the 1.3 explanation?
I get it.
Okay. So if we can go back to page 2. This is what I was just mentioning. Number 2, town funding. Absolutely, like I mentioned, the taxpayer is going to be the one that has to pay for this, whether it's through bond or through MOE contributions. I believe if we get ahead of it now and we change our oil, we're not going to have to fix our engine every other year. This increase, again, this is me personally on my own Saturday who wrote this. I don't know if the town wants to hear that increase in MOE. I don't know if the budget committee wants to hear that increase in MOE. But what I do know is if I put forward a plan that includes the town as well, it's much easier for the school to agree that this should happen. The town's kicking some, we're kicking some, the state is kicking some. I mean, it's kind of, let's all work together, the concept that I started with. So in that number 2, my proposal would be to increase MOE 200,000 a year. Increase the appropriation by 200,000. Good.
We're gonna have to do that anyways.
Yes?
Just a step increase.
Well, I asked that question. I was told it's not necessarily going to happen when the superintendent talked to me 2 Wednesdays ago. But I believe there's going to be the CPI increase.
Oh, and you don't know what fuel's gonna do. Fuel's the biggest.
What wasn't necessarily going to happen? You lost me
The
there.
CPI increase on MOE.
Oh, I don't, that's proposed at the state level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is CPI?
Consumer price index, it's basically inflation.
It's inflation.
They wanna make sure that as your costs inflate, I fund an
Inflates
inflatable piece
more, yeah.
to fund those costs. Makes sense to me.
Jason, quick question,
Sure.
the $90,000+ that the town funded for technology 2 years ago that was supposed to be in this year's base, what's gonna happen there? Because I understood by statute of law that was supposed to be in this year's MOE, which will also impact next year. Has there been any discussion or?
I think that answer plays out when you guys go after the town council for that money in MOE. That's how I've seen it play out in other communities. It's not MOE until you request that the RIDE makes a decision that it is MOE. And that request has not happened through legal counsel here yet. That's how I understand it.
Oh.
So if it's pursued by the school committee, then yeah, it might be included in MOE. But until you
I
pursue
thought
it.
it was the law. I thought it was the law. I thought it was statute.
That's not how Cumberland did it, that's not how other communities did it. They actually had to pursue that. They didn't just get it because they said so. They actually had to pursue it and get it.
So you litigate over something that's a statute? Okay, well, I get it, I guess.
Can I just ask you a question,
Sure,
Jason,
sure.
about the 200,000?
Sure, sure.
Let's say we set our budget for the next fiscal year and it's up a certain percentage or a couple of $100,000 already. Are you suggesting this 200,000 in addition to whatever it is, the budget that we've arrived at?
The other increases
The 200,000?
is in
In
addition
addition
to
to.
those other increases?
Yes, that's my question.